turn our Bibles over to Matthew chapter 8. Matthew chapter 8. This is an amazing story. I'm intimidated trying to get across this story, but we're going to jump into it. Last week we saw Jesus calming the waves. We saw the sailors, the disciples, in awe, going, "Who is this man?" That was all part of a trip, a planned retreat. Let's put it that way. That Jesus had decided that he was going to take his followers and take them to the other side of the Sea of Galilee and spend some time with just them. Now, on the way, he took a nap and slept through a storm. And we talked about how exhausted he was. And then we're going to see what happens when he lands during this this planned getaway. In verse 28, when he arrived at the other side of the region of Gadarenes, two demon-possessed men coming from the tombs met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. "What do you want with us, Son of God?" they shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, "If you drive us out, send us into that herd of pigs." He said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into town, and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. Then the whole town went out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. Okay. You ever had one of those trips that just didn't work out the way you wanted it to work out? Maybe it was a vacation. It just didn't seem to go well. Nothing seemed to click, and where you went, the hotel wasn't what you thought it was going to be, and the food was lacking. I don't know. You probably had that experience. If not, you've seen movies, right? There's an incredible backstory to this. And it doesn't take much for us to figure it out. So we're going to work on it, okay? Jesus is gone, and he wants to spend some time with his disciples alone. And so he picks an incredibly remote place to land. He could land anywhere, right? Now, here's some things we know from this story. This place had tombs, and it had pigs. All right. Let me just tell you something. This story is in Mark chapter 5, and it's in Luke chapter 8. And if you combine all of them, you're going to see there's a lot more detail to the story that Matthew doesn't give. Matter of fact, Matthew gives us a detail that Mark and Luke don't give, and that's that there were two guys. Mark and Luke has one guy. Okay? But if you put all these together, you're going to find a situation where Jesus landed where there were tombs. Now, how do Jewish people feel about tombs? No. Don't want to be near tombs. You're near dead bodies. You become unclean. Not your favorite place to hang out. How do they feel about pigs? No. Unclean. Right? You have clove and hustle. They don't chew their cud. You can't eat them. And they basically are smelly animals. Right? Now, let me give you a detail that Mark gives us. There are about 2,000 pigs. Have you ever been anywhere near 2,000 pigs? Have you? I grew up in Colorado, and a bunch of my friends went to this little college called UNC. It's like UNF, except the University of Northern Colorado. And there's this little nice plains town called Greeley, right? And it was a nice little college. Actually, my sister spent some time there. Until the wind shifted. Because on the other side of Greeley was a pig farm. And when the wind shifted, it was highly unpleasant. The smell of pigs is incredible. Now, to think that these guys were out there and herding 2,000 pigs, right? Have you ever seen anybody herd pigs anyway? No, this is not like herding sheep, okay? Pigs live in paddock-type situations where, basically they wallow in their own filth. This is not like Wilbur on Green Acres, okay? Let me give you another trivial fact, with the fear of losing you. There weren't pigs in the United States until the Spanish came. Did you know that? The Spanish brought pigs, and they took them along with them on their search for gold. And they lost some of them, and they became wild pigs. Right? You know how many generations it takes for pigs to get the tusks? Again, when they go wild? 2. You know how fast pigs breed? Okay. Have you ever seen pigs tear up the hillside? Our friend Rick here was talking about California, spent some time there. I got a chance to hunt wild pigs. Never saw one, never shot one. Okay, so. But right near town, they would have these herds of wild pigs come in and tear up things. Because they root. Pigs root, right? I'm trying to get a feel for how country you people are. Okay. Pigs root. They just dig things up with their snouts and their tusks if they've got them. And they eat roots and and things that grow down there. Okay. They would come down to the golf courses. Now, I've got some of you now, golfers. Can you imagine what pigs would do to a golf course? Okay, well that's why they were highly unpopular there, because they would come and just root whole manicured lawns up. 2,000 pigs and tombs. Why did Jesus want to land there? Nobody else was out there either. He was looking for a place to be alone with his disciples, so he could teach them some things he wanted to teach them. And so he picked this spot. Now, as soon as he landed, he was greeted by the local greeting people. These 2 guys came out of the tombs. And it says they were demon-possessed. Now, in their worldview, they believed that demons could possess them and make them do really wild things. And if you read Mark, he gives a lot of details. And of course, it gives you more reason for believing Mark was there, because Mark was saying that they used to bind this one guy up with shackles and chains. And he would break them. This was a fun guy to be around. Right? And it says that nobody could subdue him anymore. They were all afraid of this. There's one in every neighborhood, Probably not your neighborhood. This was a scary group of guys. And one of them was way over the top. He came to meet them on shore. Now, Jesus can handle this, right? It says that Jesus was trying to drive out the evil spirits. It doesn't say that in Matthew. It says that in Mark. He was trying to drive out the evil spirits, and it wasn't working. That's kind of scary. So Jesus went to plan B, which was to ask him his name. Do you remember this part of the story in Mark and Luke? And the man answered and said, "My name is Legion, because we are many." Now, they got the idea of legion from Roman soldiers who would organize into legions, which were close to 2,000 people, not quite 2,000 people. Okay? This idea of asking somebody their name. If you could learn a demon's name, you could have power over it. If you could learn a deity's name, you could have power over it. They had a whole thing about names that we don't even think about in our worldview. We don't. And so there's some things that we don't really get. When the Bible says that God's going to give us a new name, we say, "Oh, that's cool." They're like, "I don't know the name." The name thing was big to them. We don't really understand it. I'm not saying that we have to understand it. What I'm telling you is what Jesus started doing with this guy wasn't working. And so then Jesus negotiates with this wild man and the demons. He said, let me go into this herd of pigs. And Jesus said, okay, go ahead. And next thing you know, that whole herd of pigs running down over the side and into the water. I guess pigs don't swim very well. Never seen a pig try to swim. My friend Merle's, yeah, he talks about, you ever see a pig on ice? They're smart enough not to go out on the ice. Well, maybe it's because they don't swim very well if they go through the ice. I don't know. But he had 2,000 pigs bobbing in the water. But this man, and in Matthew we have 2 men, were in their right mind. And it says when the people ran into town and told everybody, they came out, they met these guys, and they were in their right mind. They were clothed, which lets you know that before they were running around in birthday suits. And it scared the town people. So wait, these guys were scared, right? I mean, these guys were scared. How would you feel about they met you when the boat landed? That would be scary, right? These people said they couldn't even pass that way. They couldn't even go to the tombs to visit the tombs anymore because these guys lived out there. They cried out and wailed all night. They would gash themselves and bruise themselves with stone. These were scary guys, and now they are sane and clothed. And that scared the townspeople because, well, to be honest, there's 2,000 pigs bobbing in the lake. There's going to be a big sale on pork this week. I mean, you'll be able to get pork. You just go fish it out of the lake. Can't keep it very long, right? No refrigerator, no freezers. A lot of people be eating pork. There's a huge economic loss going on there, right? And that scared them. The world is different now. These guys are in their right mind. That scared them. Jesus scared them. They said, please leave. Now, why did they put please in front of it? And they were afraid of him. They were afraid of him. They can't tell him what to do. But they can beg him. And it said they actually begged him not to stay, not to help their cousin, not to help their neighbor. They begged him to leave. And Jesus said, no, I was here first. I planned this whole vacation. I planned this thing with my disciples. No, we're not leaving. Yeah, I'm sorry. You missed chapter 9. No, Jesus leaves. And the next thing we see, he's back in Capernaum. Okay, we've been following some things in these stories about what Jesus values, as opposed to what the religious people value. Right? This story tells you some things about what Jesus values. He valued the lives of those 2 guys more than he valued 2,000 pigs. Well, that's not really fair to the pigs, huh? It cost this community 2,000 pigs. And they didn't like it. He also would not force himself on this community, even though they were afraid. He left. Huge things to know about God and what God values and what God will and won't do. Here's another thing I want you to think about. Jesus planned this trip, and it didn't work the way he wanted it to work. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for God understanding us? You know, God understands when things don't work out. He knows that. I mean, Jesus really wanted to go on this trip. He wanted this thing to be a time he got to spend with his disciples. It did not work out. Did he fall apart? Did he lose respect, faith in himself? No. What happens when things don't work out? You know, when I first came, we tried some various things. Remember the radio program? Sunday night, some of you guys listen. Yeah, Ken smile. Okay. You know, we sit there and we would just we would open it up and let people call in. We go, who knows what we're going to get? Okay. But we tried. We spent, you know, our personal money wasn't in church budget. Some other people backed us. We tried it. It didn't work the way we wanted it to work. You remember the Bible studies we used to do on campus over at JU? Right? You know, and it didn't really help people come. As a matter of fact, that's the whole reason we went to the whole YouTube thing. You remember that? Because they would not come to church. They loved Bible studies, but we put the church online for them to see it. Because they would ask about the sermon, and we wanted them to know what the sermon was about, so we would just put it there so they could see it. Now, that's why it's out there. Now, we've tried something new. Sometimes it doesn't work. What do we do? Let's try something else. Let's not fall apart. You know, 100 years ago, someone came up with this idea of using some time around church, when churches assembled, to educate the children. And they called it Sunday school. Did you guys know that's only a little over 100 years old? Okay? And it worked. And it had its heyday, like in the 50s, 60s, you know. And sometimes Sunday school, there were more people at Sunday school than there were at the assemblies. It's having trouble now. A lot of churches are suffering. So what do? Let's try something different. Let's do something. Do you understand that if it doesn't work, you don't have to just die in the water like a pig? You can actually just try something else. And that God understands that. And I can show you that God understands that. In Matthew chapter 8. When his trip that he wanted with his disciples just did not work out the way he thought it was going to work out. Okay. Guys, I don't know how that makes you feel. Hopefully it encourages you. Because there are some things in your life that aren't going to work out. Right? Sometimes it's careers. And sometimes it's relationships. Right? Sometimes things just don't work out. Are you going to fall apart? Are you going to know that God understands? That should be a source of incredible encouragement to you. That God understands. And if you try something else, and you don't succeed, is that okay? Yeah, it's okay. You tried something. Try it. You know, if Jesus had not gone to the other side of this lake, we wouldn't have the cool stories about him calming the waves. We wouldn't have this cool story about the great greeting committee that he got to meet over there. We wouldn't have known about the big sale on pork. If nothing else, you get some great stories. Just try something. And don't fall apart if it doesn't work. God is God. Jesus went on with his ministry. And we're going to see what he does. He comes back and he picks some fights. Chapter 9, yeah, come back. Tune in. Okay. Amazing things to learn. Things that should bring you hope and encouragement. And should bring you closer to the love that God has for you. Not everything works. Not everything works forever. Sometimes things need to change. You try. And we try to get the message out about Jesus. We try to, and it used to be a time where we could get them to come in here and listen to it. And maybe we can't do it, maybe we have to find a way to get it out there. Right? And there was a time that we could get parents and great parents and friends to bring their kids here. And it doesn't appear that that's always the case anymore. So maybe we have to find a way to get it out there to them. Because it's good news. Amen. And it's good news when you try something when it fails. It's good news, you know, not to do that again. Right? Right? And God is a God that says, hey, let's keep going. And He's not going to force Himself on anyone. You shouldn't force it on anyone. They begged Jesus to leave. He left. Now here's the good thing. The guy that was really over the top really wanted to go back with Jesus. He begged Jesus to come. Now the guy was probably a Gentile. But it caused Jesus some problems in his ministry. Right? Jesus, for whatever reason, says, no, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back to your family and your friends and tell them how good God has been to you. And so this guy goes, and to the whole side of the Sea of Galilee, he's out there telling people about what Jesus did for them and about the 2,000 pigs, I'm sure. I'm sure he's around a lot. Okay? Might not have worked out the way Jesus had in mind. But God can work through all things for good for those who love Him. They're called according to His purpose. Have you read that one? All right. That's in Romans. Okay. We should be encouraged by the story. If you're not, that's why. Because it's in your text. And Matthew put it there so his readers could remember this particular thing. Because he's going to ask them to change the way they look at people. He's going to maybe ask them the way they change to do things. And that is okay. The message is good news. We share that. And I hope this story makes what we do here more meaningful to you. Because God became flesh. And sometimes the stuff He tried didn't work. And He understands that. So we can come before Him and we can lay our plan and say, God, this is what we want to do. Here's why we want to do it. If it doesn't work, give us the strength to try something else. Give us the strength to go on. We're going to take the Lord's Supper this morning. We're going to sing a song, and then we're going to remember what Jesus did when He made that sacrifice, when He became flesh. We're going to remember that that little piece of bread represents the fact that He had flesh, and that little bit of juice represents the fact that He had blood. And this is what Jesus asked us to do. He said, when you guys do it in memory of me. And it's not a magic thing. It is so we remember. And that memory gives us courage, enough courage to go through the week acknowledging that God is God and we're not. And He's got everything covered for us. Let's stand together and sing.